Good evening, everybody. It is November 13th, 2019. I'll start by reading our vision statement. The Ashland Public Schools is a forward-thinking district that cultivates the academic and social-emotional growth of each student through a supportive, collaborative, innovative, and challenging environment. Students will develop into self-motivated, resilient, lifelong learners who embrace their role as responsible contributors to a global community. This meeting is being recorded by WACA Cable TV, and if you are going to be recording any portion of the meeting, just let me know at some point. I know our Eagle Scout is going to be recorded this evening, so thank you for letting me know. Our order of business this evening is our open session call to order, opening procedures, agenda review and adoption, recognitions and student presentations if we have any. We will have some time for public comment. And our administrative items this evening include the proposal for an Eagle Scout project at the Warrant School. We have, I'm going to ask if we have Mindess academic program transition on the agenda a little bit further down, and I'm going to ask to be moving that to number 2, if that's okay. We have some budget activity, student activity bank reconciliations quarterly, July to September 2019, FY19 budget end of year, FY20 budget update, the superintendent's report, the assistant superintendent's report, warrant approvals, consent actions, approval of minutes of October 30th, 2019 and October 23rd, 2019, acceptance of gifts and donations if there are any, committee reports of activities, member updates, action items, and then we will adjourn. Is everybody okay with that order of business this evening?
Yes, thank you.
Do we have any recognitions and student presentations this evening? So I will start by inviting anybody who would like to come up and comment. Are there any folks that want to comment this evening? I don't know if this person's walking into the meeting. Give them a minute just in case somebody's walking in. Oh, Gabby? I don't want to put her on the spot, but I don't want to move on from that in the event that
She's just.
You want to just restate?
Yep, I'm just wondering if there's anybody who would like to offer any public comment this evening. I think somebody else is walking in, sorry. I just don't want people, if they're coming for that purpose, I don't want them to miss their opportunity. Okay, so seeing none, we will move on to our first item on the agenda, and that's the proposal for the Eagle Scout project at the Warrant School. So yes,
Yeah, please.
please come up to the microphone, introduce yourself, please. Let us know what you got.
So, good evening. My name is Aditya Kansal. I'm a sophomore at Ashland High School and a Life Scout of Troop 232 Ashland. Over the last couple months and over working on it over the summer, Principal Peter Reagan and I have been in the planning stages of a community project to repaint the 34 classrooms at the Warrant Elementary School. I've gone through all of them with Mr. Reagan, and we've really assessed that this project could truly benefit the students and help brighten the classrooms to be more engaging, as well as help students appreciate the value of their education at a younger age. The project is also designed to bring the community together, working towards a common goal. I have copies of my proposal that I've prepared and that's gotten approved if you'd like one, and I'm open to any questions.
Just explain a little bit more. I mean, we know a little bit more of what you're doing, but the process you're going to take in terms of getting the donated materials, the time it's going to take, et cetera.
Right. Do you have folks that are willing to work with you? Or what's your process going to be?
So each classroom we've kind of looked into logistics of it. It'll be around 5 to 6 people working on one classroom at once. It all depends on who's willing to work and when, but we will set up schedules. We will use social media and other outlooks to put the project out there and to gain a little bit of publicity in that sense. In terms of timings, we're looking at like Friday nights after school hours, so that the paint can dry and classrooms can be set up for students to go back to work. We have been in the stages of preparing waves on how we would paint the classrooms, and I know the teachers are working on color schemes for the classrooms at the Warrant School right now.
So,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask what the time frame is when you hope to start and how long you think it'll take?
So we still have to confirm color schemes, and paints will have to be ordered, but we could start as early as the beginning of December if everything goes as planned. In terms of timing, it all depends on how our flow goes, and if I've set a mark for fall of 2020, but we can always adjust as needed.
Mr. Regan, do you want to explain some of the process?
Thank you.
So a few of the things that we've done so far is from meeting with the DTO this summer of him sharing his vision to make a difference at one of our schools, and we were excited to have him at the Warren School. Immediately he saw some of the work that was done by one of our second grade teachers, Liz Secretary, who painted her classroom, and it was great timing actually. It was a few days before other teachers were just commenting on how talented of a painter Liz is and how inviting her classroom then appeared. Two were standing in the hallway and said if there was only a way we could have people come in to help us paint, this could be amazing for all of our children. At that point, I reached out to Mr. Adams and said, is this something that you think could work for an Eagle Scout project? He said, absolutely. And DT and I started meeting, and it really picked up a lot of steam quickly. He was excited by this prospect. Our teachers formed a committee, and they identified set colors, so this way we don't have 34 different color schemes going on, which would be a little bit of a challenge for us to just stay ahead on the painting materials. So we had a committee formed where they allowed choices, and the staff members then created a choice between one of 4 different colors of the walls, one of 2 different colors on the bulletin boards, and then finally 1 color for trim. So the teachers have identified those, and we're ready to be with that. As far as some of the funding pieces that our DT didn't mention, is he will be doing some of the fundraising as far as paying for some of the painting materials, as well trying to have some donations for pizzas and other things for our painters that are there. But from our gifts and donations at the Warren School, we're going to be paying for the paint to be doing this, as that's a large expense, and it's a great benefit for our school and our children.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah,
Any other questions or comments?
My only concern is that if we're gonna be painting when it's cold out, and making sure we're using paint that's low to no VOC, especially if we're painting on a night and children will be in the building the next morning. We don't want those volatile organic compounds to be breathed in.
So the paints were approved by Gio Richardson, our facilities director. In addition to that, the painting schedule that we've looked at and created is that it's going to allow for the paint to be able to dry and then also for the room to be set back up. So the majority of the painting will be done in some of the classrooms where there's not a lot of materials on the walls. We'll be able to start the painting projects on some of our Friday nights with those classrooms. Other classrooms that have many materials on the wall will be a project that will be scheduled out to the school vacations and then into the summer as well. Again, as the DT mentioned, it's also going to depend on how many volunteers we have that are coming and how many teams we can have painting rooms. As he's identified, it's about 5 to 6 painters per room to be able to finish in one evening. That's going on our resident painter of Liz Secretary, who did an amazing job, so we used her off of all of our estimates of times.
Excellent.
Are you looking for any particular groups to volunteer, or is it just wide open? Are you looking for students? Are you looking for just community members?
It can really be anyone. We're looking to see maybe if we can get a couple professional painters to show us the ropes at first. I know I could definitely use the help, but it's really designed to kind of bring everybody together. It could be students, it could be adults, it could all ages. I mean, just you should be able to paint, really.
If you send me the information, I'll make sure that the Ashland Dads group gets it,
Okay.
so that we have lots of guys that would be willing to help. There might be some people volunteering that has expertise, and I'll throw it to my wife, who has a lot of professional connections in that space too, that might be able to donate some time at least to get you going. So.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
I just emailed Mr. Regan. There is a parent of a first grader who's a professional painter who's painted my house and my father's house. So it's somebody who could probably show us the ropes.
Thank you.
Sure, take it.
Excellent. Well, I think it sounds amazing, and we're so lucky to have people like you that have been beautifying our buildings for a while now, so thank you for being part of that, and it sounds like a great project. Is this something that we need to
Yeah,
vote
just
on?
Move to approve the project and take place inside the Warren School.
I did have just one other question for
Sure.
Mr. Adams,
Yeah.
actually. Do we typically have our custodians do any painting in the buildings? Does this present any kind of union concerns for us?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, we used that at probably, it's going back 15 years? 15 years ago, we had an actual painter on staff, and that was one of the positions cut back in the 06, 07 timeframe.
Okay, good. So that doesn't create an issue. Thank you.
All right, do we have a motion?
Sure. Move to approve.
Oh,
Somebody
hold on
there.
one second.
Jim.
Oh,
Timeout.
sorry.
Just to add a point, as his coach counselor.
Yeah.
He has to meet several criteria that are listed in this project. And one of them is creating a chart for the labor and keeping track
Yep.
of all those hours, who they are by name.
Great.
And submit that at the end of the project. So it's that's only one part of his overall requirements.
Thank you.
Excellent, good to
Yes.
know. Thank you. So hopefully you'll get lots of helpers, and it'll be a very big chart.
Keep track of those hours.
Yeah. Anybody who's watching, might have a few extra people watching tonight, so if that's the case, then please volunteer to help paint.
So
If you can.
I'll move to approve Aditya, is that how I say, Consal?
Yep.
Consal's proposal for an Eagle Scout service project to paint classrooms at Warren School.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. You're good.
Good to,
Thank you for doing it.
yeah.
Okay, so moving on with our Mindess academic program transition. I don't know, if Jim, if you had anything you wanted to say. I can start with sort of recapping where we're at and how we got here. It's been about 2 years, actually. November 29th, 2017, Mr. Adams brought to the school committee the proposal to do a study for the programming over at Mindess. So that was one of our earliest meetings on that, and we discussed, I think that particular meeting was a discussion about who from this group might sit on the study. And then the study was, people were invited to participate, and there were parents and teachers and administrators, students, and myself from the school committee. And it was led by Dr. Maureen Cohen. She's somebody that we hired from another district to run the study. And the study took place over just about the entire year of 2018. It started in January or February, and it ended in December. And she reported to us, there was a midpoint about May when she came in and reported to us where we were at. And then she reported to us her findings in February of this year, 2019. After that, we had 2 workshops this summer. We typically have a school committee retreat every summer, and that is where we talk about things like the vision for the district, the blueprint, or anything that requires, we might require a lot of time that a meeting, an evening meeting, might not permit us. So we had 2 days in the summer, 2 retreats. One day, Dr. Kyra came, and another day, Mrs. Bennett came. And we had the opportunity to ask them our questions about what the ideal programming at Mindess would look like to them, and all of the questions around that. From that, and I don't want to make assumptions, I assume Mr. Adams was engaged in conversations with the folks over at Mindess, and starting early October, he had a plan for how we would discuss the next steps, that he would be making a proposal on October 23rd, and that the following week would be an opportunity for people to come to the meeting and provide comment, that people could write letters, which I did receive several, most of which I told you about the last time. There have been a few since then. And then on this night, we would be potentially voting on something. So that's where we're at now. That's been the process for us. That's sort of the series of events that we bring to this discussion. I know, and I can appreciate that people have entered the conversation at different points. I see people in the room that were on the study. I've heard from other people that said, why am I just hearing about this last week or the week before? And I totally understand all of it. We're all busy, but just also to let you know what we're bringing to this conversation and how long we've been looking at it and thinking about it. And I think from all of your notes and your input, there's still quite a bit to still talk about. So having said that, I'm going to open it up to the rest of the committee, or Mr. Adams, if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, I'm good. I'll defer to the committee to have the conversation as that was the intention after getting feedback.
I mean, I know I'll start it this way. I know Mr. Adams sent out a letter to the community. I think you had maybe 3 or 4 different possibilities of what the committee could do with all the information that we've gathered up to this point. So if anybody wants to start by talking about where you're at in that process.
Yeah, I'm happy to start. I mean, I think I'm at where I expressed when we last met, which is, I think the guidance from the committee when we had our retreat discussions over the summer was, tell us what the future is, and let's see what that future programming should be. We aren't there yet, and I think we talked through that. I know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get there. I want to, I guess, be clear that I am supporting the additional work that needs to be done. That ultimately our goal is not to sort of look at things sort of as an either or in the terms of, for example, the neighborhood program or the single age program. Like multi-age and single age program, but rather to look at what's best and not to be confined by what we've done for a period of time, but always to be looking at what's next and trying to be able to do better for our kids every day, really. And this is an opportunity for us that because there's a building project running alongside of this, we can really have a building that's designed around a program. But I think those are complementary things, not necessarily one driving the other. So at the end of the day, I guess I'm really at a point of saying I certainly want to support the work that administration needs to do to really make a detailed recommendation to us about what the future should look like, and include in that really a discussion about transition, because I think that's really important primarily for people who have kids in the neighborhood program now. And that's the one that we've talked about as potentially being sort of has a phase-out component because of the way it works, because there are kids in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and you can't keep that going while also trying to move to something different in the future. So that's kind of, I guess, just to answer your question, that's where I'm at. And I'm happy to discuss a motion that supports the further work that needs to be done. But I also don't want to leave this so open-ended that people think that that's some sort of cursory exercise or something like that. I think this is really about what the future of the Mindess academic program should be. And I'm looking forward to seeing what that's going to be. I know, as I said last time, Mike has shared both with us, I think, a bit during the summer, but also in his presentation 2 weeks ago, what that can look like. And I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of exciting opportunities we may have coming. And I'm looking forward to the community and the staff hearing that as well, because I think I'm right in saying that there hasn't been a lot of detailed discussion around that yet.
Yeah, you said it perfectly.
You concur?
I'll take that.
I concur.
What he said.
What he said. I was thinking a different word we could use is how it's going to morph, or instead of phasing out, but how are we going to morph all the great things about all the programs? And I definitely want to see more detail, exactly what Mark said, so.
Yeah, and, so I kind of have been waffling internally about whether I actually have a statement I wanted to read or whatever, and so I kind of landed in the middle of that, and so I did write down some things, but I concur with a lot of what you said, Mark. I think where I am is I'm not ready to vote on a change, on an actual change without the detail, but I think we need to say that a change is what we want. And that that we need to say we need a direction. This group here are not the educators. We cannot come up with that with that plan, right? So I think I'm similar to you. So let me just, this is kind of what I put down, and I tried to keep it as short as possible, but so I did want to thank everyone that took the time to reach out and share your thoughts with us. I know that the idea of change, particularly something that's important, isn't easy. It isn't easy for anyone. The teachers at Mindess, all of them, I respect and admire the work you do every day for the students and families. It's amazing work. I have 2 children. Between them, they've experienced all 5 teaching models that was in Mr. Adams' last communication. My daughter went through the single age program and has transitioned well to have a great time at the middle school. My son is currently in the neighborhood, and I expect him to grow in that environment as well. All the teachers he's been engaged with, and both of them have been dedicated and talented educators, and couldn't have asked for more. I totally understand some of the sentiment from all the feedback we've gotten, how the recommendation made at our October 23rd meeting, it's easy to focus on phase out in the neighborhood program. But to reiterate what Mark said, our discussion here and the ultimate decision isn't about eliminating programming at all, but rather how can we continue to move the programming forward to provide the best possible educational experience for all our children. And I don't want to try to address all the different areas of feedback we received, but there's a couple of themes I did want to address. There were several people that wrote that their children received a level of differentiation, particularly enrichment, in the neighborhood that was not possible in a single grade model. And I disagree with that, and I'll actually use the neighborhood as an example. Once a child reaches the 5th grade in the neighborhood, there are no upper level peers, higher level peers to group them with. Therefore, the enrichment available to that 5th grade student in the neighborhood has nothing to do with whether the neighborhood is being multi-grade or not. Instead, the only advantage would be that the teaming model is built into the neighborhood programming, allowing one teacher to take a group of students and focus on enrichment, while another can take a group and focus on supports that those students might need. However, that style of teaching doesn't, can be done in any grade configuration. And my expectation is that the goal of all of our programs, including whatever one comes next, the goal would be to provide each student with the right level of support, intervention, or enrichment that they need. Much of the conversations around the neighborhood have centered around equity, which can be interpreted and perceived in many ways. Some have said the entry into the neighborhood is fair and therefore equitable, or that there are easy solutions to the fact that some of our student populations are underrepresented in the neighborhood. However, things are rarely as simple as they seem, and equity is more than just fairness. When we run programs that do not reflect our community regardless of the reasons, we do all our students disservice. I believe that a student that spends 3 years in our schools and does not learn and collaborate with their neighbors of varying backgrounds and socioeconomic status have lost a valuable opportunity. One person even went as far as to say that we shouldn't cater to students and families that don't show up, but those that do. I disagree with that very strongly. I believe that our public schools cannot and must not turn our backs on the children who find themselves in situations that they can't understand or control. In fact, ensuring that all students, regardless of their socioeconomic status or any other barrier, receive the opportunities and supports they need to succeed is the single most important thing we do in the public schools. But equity isn't just something we need in the neighborhood, we need it throughout the building. And this isn't about picking on anything about the neighborhood. There's team teaching or other delivery methods that are used in the single grade program as well, but they're inconsistent. And in those programs, while student population is representative of our community, there may be inequities based on placement. If my child goes through one set of teachers, they get a different experience than someone else. And that is why I believe we need a holistic program that is both equitable and has the flexibility to provide each student with the services they need to succeed. So, that's why I prepared.
Thanks, Paul.
Erin?
Yeah, so first I'd like to say, I very much apologize for not being here, but I had to be in Kansas City for work, and I actually am flying very, very late tonight so I could be here for tonight's discussion and potential vote. But I did watch the entirety of the meeting the following day, and I've read every single email. And because I haven't been part of the discussion, even though I didn't get to write it down, I've had these thoughts in my head, and specifically one point that Paul just made you all know that how I felt about that one email. But I'd like to sort of give you a history of being the townie. Lori's close to being a townie, but you
Just
all.
because I'm so old.
No.
But yes, but you're a real,
But
you're a
I'm
real-
a legit
yeah.
townie. I actually had, and one of the most influential teachers in my upbringing was Jane Mason. And she is who created the neighborhood, along with Miss Matteries. So, being that I live in this town that I grew up in, and I knew Mrs. Mason created this program, and I also had a neighbor that did it, there were two things that I knew when my oldest child was born. Given that he had a July birthday, he was a boy, and he's non-neurotypical. I knew two things that were going to happen. One, I was probably going to redshirt him, which means keeping your child back a grade. And two, I was probably going to put him in neighborhood. Because academically, when it came time for him to transition, he was reading above grade level because of his age. But socially, emotionally, he was not. And I even sat with I very much struggled with, was this going to be the right decision for him? Because he has a follower. Was he going to follow bad behaviors, good behaviors, whatnot? But I had known ever since this child was born that this was his likely academic path. That said, a lot of the emails and the feedback that we have received have been all the positives, and there are many, which is why we want to carry those positives into whatever this new vision for Mindess is. And I just had, being that it's conference time, what we want to get out of the neighborhood program, I am realizing. My teacher knows my child inside and out. He has grown and is now falling into that role model role, bringing younger kids up. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. That said, there are things that haven't been mentioned that I see as detriments to the program that we need to address. One is not seeing your classmates enough that are in your age. And especially when we're talking about serving all students, unless you are in activities and make a very concerted effort with other parents to see other children, there can be a friendship void for a couple of years until you're back at the middle school. And even with how connected we are, how active we are, we've found it a struggle. The multiple grade levels on the recess fields can be difficult. It can be very difficult to navigate. You have 2 to 2.5 year age gap between your youngest and your oldest, and the athletic talents and sort of the dynamic that can create can be very hard. We used to call it the hornet's nest. You're gonna go in there, you're gonna get stung, because the oldest boys play rough because they're older and stronger. And that can be difficult for kids. And also the way the leveling is done from our personal experience, my oldest really does have strengths in literacy, but his learning disabilities are primarily math. And once he was leveled and struggled last year, there wasn't a mechanism to move him down. There wasn't that retesting the way that there used to be, or reevaluating and moving him down. Maybe there was within the classroom, but this year he's in a different classroom where he really needs to be. So there's some of those things. A lot of the emails that we have received have been from families that we know because they're involved in the schools. And there's a little bit of this that feels a little bit of affluenza. We live in this amazing town. It's one of the top 30 school districts in the state that's the #1 academically in the country. And we're looking for this little tiny difference in edge that we can give our kids, when really most of the people that sorry, that's a bedtime alarm.
Good night.
Yeah,
Good night, Griff.
that's all for Aaron.
True, Aaron.
You go to sleep at 6:30?
Wow.
Bedtime
want
for
that.
Griffin
I'm
starts
in.
at 6:30, yes.
Yeah, right?
I'll go.
My children need their sleep. Great. Now I forgot where I was. Oh, the children of the parents that have reached out because of their income, their academic backgrounds, their engagement, those kids are going to be okay. And the 5 of us elected up here, and this is what I've thought about most, is that we are here to represent every child of the district, and especially those that don't have a voice. And that's why I was, like Paul, incredibly bothered by the email saying that we should cater to the parents that show up. And that is, I find that very disturbing. So there's so much good that I want to take, but I just also see that the strides that have been made on the other side of the building, and that statement in and of itself, right there, the other side of the building, and the physical sort of segregation, we need to work on that. I even went as so far as emailing Dr. Kyra and asking to see the calendar to see if with any of my nerd skills could I throw together something that would potentially work, that had, that could, because I understand the struggle, and that's another thing that Paul said. Some of the ideas that people have said of like, oh, we could do this, we've tried. This administration has tried for years to address some of the communication issues, the engagement issues, and there are some things that are too urgent to work on to try to keep trying in those avenues. And so I'm in agreement with what Mr. Terry said, also with what Mr. Kendall said, as far as I don't want to vote on something that says, yes, blow it away right now. But I do want to vote on something that says, this is what the administration, here's some tasks that to come back, but come back relatively quickly, because I think what's happening now is that you have parents that have put 2 and 3 kids through neighborhood and then are now deciding, no, it's not even worth the risk. And I think we're going to end up with a self-fulfilling prophecy and potentially a bigger problem administratively of how to organize if we don't have an appropriate sort of wean down or shift time over the next couple of years to shift the classrooms and do what we need to do. So I think voting on something that is more of a challenge or charter to the administration is what I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, and to that end, I think we've had some conversation already. Coming in here, I wasn't sure how the evening was going to go. So I was planning on bringing a motion forward and maybe asking to do more of a standard Robert's Rules.
Where you go there, Paul, can we see where Lori's at?
Yeah, and
Don't mind.
before, and since the chair usually opens up to the discussion to the
Sorry
board,
about that.
I'd love to hear from Rachel. I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have anything you want to share, only because Rachel was on the study committee. She sat through our workshops this summer, sitting here with us for all the meetings, and I know that you've thought a lot about this, and this isn't pressure, honestly. If you've said everything you have to say on this, we can move on. I just didn't want you to feel like you couldn't. There have been several times when Rachel has been the voice of reason in the room, or at least, certainly offered a perspective that is very helpful and very valuable. So I don't want this discussion to go any further without offering you a chance to participate.
I also agree with what the committee is saying. I think that I think it's too early to vote to say, okay, let's make this change happen. I think there needs to be maybe a little bit more time. And I know that, kind of have to move quickly. But I feel like if the decision is made now, I feel like we're just not giving everyone in the community enough time to you know, think this through. And then also there's really no plan, and to vote on it without a plan, I don't know, that seems a little off to me. So I agree that there should be, plan from administrators before that vote is made.
Thank you, Rachel.
You gonna pull papers in the spring?
Yeah. How old do you have to be?
18.
I think.
She's
18 to
good.
run for office?
You should.
Yeah, so I mean, I can't disagree with anything that's been said here. You know, my perspective was, you know, I went into the study, and I won't share it all again, nobody wants to hear it, but I did go in with an open mind, feeling very pleased with the education that my kids got in both programs, and without any awareness of anything that was going to be difficult. But what was difficult for me in that study was the equity piece. That was really something that weighed on me, and like my colleagues have mentioned, what might be good for my kid is fabulous, and as their parent, I'm going to continue pursuing that all the time. But in this role as a school committee member, I take very seriously my job to do what's best for all kids. And I think we can do better by everybody. And I also think that from what I heard, and if I'm not framing this properly, I want you to pipe in, because this involves me like maybe putting some words in your mouths. But after going through this process, listening to how the administrators, Mrs. Bennett and Mr. Kyra, responded to our questions, listening to what they said was their ideal Mindess, and then listening to all of you, I haven't heard anybody, you know, challenging or being really adamant that this isn't the right time to do something new, to take the best of everything that we know is working and do our best to apply it to, and because it's true, there have been 20 years, and we've been through a variety of we've tried different things with the lottery. You know, the second grade teachers have had 20 years to figure out how to explain the program to people. I mean, obviously, they all haven't been around for that entire time, and we have new people and new administrators, and things change. But I think we've tried to a certain extent, work out some of the kinks to try to solve some of these problems. But I think, you know, we hire our administrators for a reason, and they're the ones in the building that know what's going on with the students, know what's going on with the staff, and I really do value their opinion. And, you know, Mr. Kyra is saying that it's too big to just take some of these little Band-Aids and try to fix things. So where I'm at is that I think, at least the part that's clear, is that something new needs to happen. And I think we've given some guidance through our questions and through what's come out here about the kinds of things that we'd like to see. And by the way, in that process, it wasn't all about like, tell us what's working or not working in the neighborhood. We were also learning that there were some things, quite a few things in the traditional program that could be improved upon. Some areas were really functioning well with some of these things that we've been talking about, and other people just needed some more professional development or some more time or some more whatever. So this, for us, at least for me, was never about this, everything's going really well over here, it's not going so well over there, let's just throw it all together. I mean, there are things everywhere that need some changes, and I think Dr. Vera said at our last meeting, this could be a real opportunity. So that's where I'm at. I think we're at a point where this is an opportunity. I haven't heard anybody objecting to that part of it, and everyone still has the right to do that because we haven't voted yet. But I feel like that part is settled. I do, however, agree that until, you know, we know what we're moving toward, it's difficult to say, all right, all bets are off, and, you know, okay, so then what? And I know you folks in the community, very rightly so, are looking for clarification. And so are we. So, I mean, I'm ready to say that I support a change, which is probably going to entail big changes for everybody, if I have what I would like to see. But as far as how that looks and how that gets rolled out, I think we need to see that, and then we need to approve that piece of it later. But at least, you know, not at least making a stand on the change part of it, just, you know, drags it out even further for something that it seems like we are already all on the same page about. And it leaves too much uncertainty in the community for what should people do, you know, for next year, or you know, so that's where I'm at. I'm ready to say we need a change. I'm not ready to say exactly to what, because I need to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, Laurie. I think the piece I've struggled with in my own mind about how to sort of provide that direction, provide that clarity, is if we were to, in saying that there's a change, I don't know what that, it could be any number of
Right.
things. It could be the whole building becomes a, sort of a single age type program. It could be a whole building becomes a neighborhood type program. It could be option C, D, E, or F, or whatever it might be, and I don't know that. And so, even when we talk about, you know, there's going to be impact for some, that may be true. And I certainly, I'm saying things sort of in a speculative nature, so I don't want people walking away thinking, oh, you know, that's something they're talking about. We haven't talked about anything. These guys may have, but I want to leave, well, I think we need to sort of say we're moving forward and that we are looking for that plan and then preserve the right to review whatever that plan is. I'm also wanting to, I'm not sure how far beyond that I'm ready to go. And I'm not sure how anybody feels about that in terms of, do we want to sort of commit to moving to a single program within the building, whatever that single program might be? Do we want to leave open the possibility that it might be some form of different programs, meaning a program A and a program B, or an A and a 1? So, I mean, I'm still struggling with that piece of it. And not in a way that is, I don't want to cloud the issue for folks, because I think that, you know, people need to understand that there is some sort of change coming. And they need to understand that and then be informed of it along the way so they can see it, develop it, have input where appropriate into that. And I don't know whether a motion is necessary or not. I don't have an objection to a motion, as I said before. I'm just struggling to think about how to frame that at this point in a way that I'm comfortable giving the community notice that a change is likely, highly likely, to give support to Mr. Kyra and to Mr. Adams and Mr. Vieira and others that'll be working on it to know that they have support. And I think, I would hope that sitting here listening, they could get a pretty good sense of the committee's desire to move forward in a different direction, right? But I am personally struggling with sort of how to sort of draw the lines around, you know, what piece of clarity we want to provide now and what we need to leave for still to come. So that's
The only comment I would have to mark what you just said is I would caution on leaving open the opportunity for two distinct programs, even if those two distinct programs look completely different than they do today, because I think we'll end up in the same spot.
And my only purpose in that is not because I think that's what's going to happen. It's that I haven't heard that it's not, you know, and so it's what I really.
But we have heard that unity is an issue.
Right.
And
Yes.
we've made that
And
a high
I-
value in this
Yes,
conversation.
and I fully support that,
Yeah.
and Erin, I think you did a very nice job of outlining a lot of the positives and the mentoring aspect, which I think if there's one piece of the neighborhood program that was highlighted the most in the emails, it was the perspective on mentoring, and that's certainly a dialogue that came up for our meetings over the summer. I think that's feedback that you know, that Mr. Adams and Mr. Kyra have both received from us as well as others. So you know, it may be that there really isn't a realistic multi-program model, but I think, you know, from my perspective, as I think Paul, you said before, we're not the professional educators. And Lori, as you said, we trust our administrators, and so I'm looking at it as like, if Mr. Adams and Mr. Kyra come forward and say, you know what, we're just throwing stuff against the wall, we came up with this, you know, 47 different model option, right? And it's gonna work, and, you know, I don't wanna put constraints on their thoughts,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
my
of
point.
course.
And, you know, I think
Sure.
functionally and practically, I
But in
think we're gonna
fairness
get
to
a
them,
recommendation.
they've shared their thoughts that about the unity piece of it.
Yeah, and I do understand that, and I
Yeah.
suppose if Mr. Adams and Mr. Kyra are able to even say to me now that, you know, we are committed to it being a recommendation for a single program, that, you know, is something that,
Yeah.
you know, I think helps me feel more comfortable with that, making that.
Well, and even a
So-
single program, I think what you're really getting at, Mark, is we don't wanna set artificial boundaries, on what, and you mentioned the administrators, but all the educators in that building, right? It doesn't need to be something that Mike and Claudia are passionate about. It needs to be something that every educator in that building buys into and is gonna be able to, put their heart into and teach with fidelity and work with fidelity. That program could mean, hey, we're able to do A and B. They're not separate programs. They're all under the same umbrella, but you're able to provide, if right now, if you're in a neighborhood, you might get, methods 1 through 6, and 1 through 5 are awesome for you, and 6 isn't. But guess what? You're getting 6. Maybe a new program says, and the same thing could be in a single. Maybe now there's 12 tools in the tool belt, and they can say, hey, these 9 are perfect for this kid, and maybe there's a program that allows you to better adapt and make sure that all those are there.
Yeah, and I will say this, I mean, if the committee feels that it's necessary to sort of have a motion to support a single program, if that's a part of where others want to go, I think I'm also comfortable supporting that with the understanding that if for some reason Mr. Adams, Mr. Kyra, and others come back and say, we know you asked for this, but we think there's something else, I suspect just knowing the people we're talking about, they're not going to be confined no matter what kind of constraints we put on them anyway.
Right.
So I don't want to spend a lot of time getting on my hang up about this particular issue either.
Well, I
and
think that
respect where
goes
you're coming
without
from.
saying. I mean, obviously, again, we've talked about how we're making the kids and their education our highest priority, and if at some point somebody came back to us and said there's like a new element to this conversation and we need to bring this in a different direction, there would be nothing stopping us from doing that, in my view.
I think there'd be consequences if they didn't bring it forward. So,
Yeah.
I would expect
Right,
nothing less.
so I mean,
So-
I expect that, but I also kind of feel, I guess maybe it's part of the point that I was trying to make earlier, and I'm just trying to like address the elephant in the room. You guys can address it again if you want to, but I feel like that's already been made clear, and I didn't hear anybody objecting. So if we want more time so that we can object, that's one thing, but if that's something that you're clear about and that you're still all what I've been hearing, and I think that's the fairest thing to put out, because it gives people an opportunity to plan and prepare, rather than, let's take 3 months to come back and have you tell us what you already told us, and then we'll vote on it, and then
Right.
we'll move forward. So that's kind of where I understand, I
Yeah.
have the same dilemma,
Yeah.
but in my thinking through it, I'm thinking the part of it that I think, in fairness, seems resolved to me, based on who's making the decision. We should resolve it, if we can. And then, but also not agreeing to anything that we haven't seen that we're comfortable with.
Yeah. And I think we need to say something, whether that be something that we got consensus on or we vote on. If you want to, I did prepare a motion that I think captures most of what we just said, and we can augment it if need be. But what
Can I ask Mr. Adams a question first before you read the
Absolutely.
motion? Okay. Is there any DOE, DESE restraint on having the entire school be a neighborhood, like the current model of a multi-year? And then I remember Kathy mentioned something about a Horace Mann school. Can you explain like what that is or what that concept is?
I'm not sure I can, I haven't worked in a Horace Mann chart, I mean,
Isn't a Horace Mann charter school
Yeah.
sort of a charter school within a school district?
Right.
I mean, really?
it's not.
So like the way that the other charters around here are separate from the town
Right,
and they're
they're
multi-towns,
independent.
they're
Right.
within the
So
town.
Springfield might have a Horace Mann because it's so large.
Right.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot
Right,
out
there are not many.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
and in talking about other programs, I mean, one of the letters I got, somebody asked me to, why don't you
But
look
there's-
into model districts, what are they doing? And gave an example of one in Newton, and I happen to have a colleague on the Newton School Committee, so I contacted her. What are you guys doing? Why, because they were listed on a countrywide list of like the #1 school in the nation, or it was in the top 5 somewhere. So, and they were elementary age, just like the age group that we're talking about. And really the answer was, they're not doing anything special. They don't have any special programs or anything like that. From the point of view of this particular school committee member, it was demographics, basically. You know, and they live in a community where people are able to get the extra supports and so forth. And so the study was based on who's got the highest MCAS scores and some of those other things that you can measure against others, and that's why they ended up on that list. So, you know, we could continue obviously looking into, but you can't find another multi-age program, I don't think, right, anywhere to compare, so.
Not like this.
Yeah, not like this. So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
but-
I mean, I don't have much more to say except that as we unfold the process itself, I think what's important for the community to understand is that when I brought forward my recommendation, it has to come here first. It can't be, and it could not be, me spending time with the faculty and staff saying, this is what I'm thinking we should do. Let's come together and create that would just be outside of the boundaries of what the school committee's responsibility is. That's how it works. And that's the struggle. So I was totally prepared to have them say, as a committee, we need more definitive answers, Jim, as to what you're thinking. And for me, I've always included staff to have that conversation. We couldn't have that opportunity without at least presenting it here first. So from what I'm hearing, I think it gives us the possibility to include staff now in that conversation to create something, whatever that might look like. It's one of those things, it's sort of stuck between where do we present first and how do we present the information. So I thought a lot about that for months. What's the right approach? And had I, first day of school said, hey, this is what I'm thinking, I'm sure we'd still be having this conversation right now without, the school committee knowing, because I'm not coming to you and saying, this is what I'm thinking. Mike and I have certainly had those conversations, and Paul, but I think this allowing and affording the opportunity for staff to be a part of the ongoing process is the right thing to do. And there are so many good components of all the programming that exists. And my job is to think about what's best for the entire school. And sometimes it's hard. It's hard for me to, I'm making a judgment call based on what I've seen over 6 years, what I've looked at for data, the conversations I've had, not only with the folks that are in favor of keeping the programming the way it is, but having the conversation with folks who are unhappy with the way the programming exists today. We won't see them here. We know that. It's not going to happen. And that's a struggle for me. I know it's a struggle for you, that those silent voices are not providing the feedback that you also need.
Well, I've had people share anonymously, but once
Right.
they're anonymous, we have a
can't-
policy that we can't
Don't share.
entertain it.
But
having
there have been a number of emails that
Sure.
really have come back in favor of change as well, and I assume those were all getting posted along with the other
Yeah.
ones,
Yeah.
right?
They
Absolutely.
are. Everything
Yeah,
is.
and
Just
lots
gotta
and
wade
lots
through
of
them all.
really thoughtful.
I don't have them
input,
categorized.
on all aspects of this, so we certainly really
I mean,
appreciate that.
Again, I am here to serve you, so, in the community. So whatever charge it is, we just need to have clarity as to what you're expecting of us, which is fine.
Well, I'd like to hear what Paul maybe came up with for motion, and we could amend it or augment it, or.
Mr. Kendall?
So the motion was, I move that we unify the Mindess curricular programming, moving it to an as-yet determined model that incorporates the best practices currently utilized both throughout Mindess as well as in education as a whole. The details of this unified model, including structure, delivery methods, transition plan, and timeline for transition, will be voted on by the school committee when available. Until such time, no changes related to this transition will be made. Which I think captures most of what we talked about. and says, we wanna move forward with something, but we're not ready to make any changes relative to that until there's detail.
I like it. I think there's a couple things I would amend. One is timeframe of when we would expect that back to us.
Personally, any time frame I put on it would be arbitrary. I have no idea how long it would take. If I was an educator, maybe I would, but I could say I want it tomorrow, but, or I could say it was 2 months, and is that too long?
Well, there must be some kind of time limits just based on when people are starting to make decisions about at least next year, right?
Well, so we,
That and the
maybe we need a
building
second though before we start debating the motion.
Right, yeah.
What, Mark?
It's a
Well,
bit-
Second of
yes,
the
can
motion.
somebody second,
It's-
please?
Second.
Oh, I'll
Okay,
second it.
So, open for discussion.
Uh, So my
You're
thoughts
thinking you
were
might add-
schedule because of not only second grade families trying to make decision, looking at what it's gonna look like next year, the implication for MASBO and the building process. That I think we should explicitly state that the program, the two main benefits are the mentoring piece and the instruction model of the, I'm sorry.
Skill-based grouping?
Skill-based grouping, but what's different from the way it is now is the fact that that potentially would change throughout the year with different evaluations.
Well, that's why it's skill-based as opposed to level-based. So
Okay.
skill is you move on to this unit and.
But you're asking to put that in the
I don't-
motion?
I don't think we should.
Well, only because I think they understand, I think, that that's part of what we're looking for. But if you start making the motion too detailed, do you think
Yeah.
that, again, to Mark's point, like maybe boxes people into
and-
coming up with
and-
something?
And I think you're just,
I think we keep it
there is
broad.
no, there's no way something's gonna come back and not have those things.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't take the small thing that somebody mentioned, that, oh yeah, let's make sure that's in there. That's the meat of the goodness that everybody, to a person, everybody said that, right? One of the things that my son enjoyed was, the reason he liked it, he likes being with kids different ages. Not all kids do, but, he liked that. So I personally, adding that, not adding something else,
Well, I think once we start adding things, we're creating the program.
Right.
and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would
I think
venture
we
to
keep it
say that
broad.
when they come back with something,
If something's missing.
we have
Yeah.
feedback, and that would be the time to say, oh, but what about A, B, or C?
Right.
Because I don't think it's okay, come back, we're yes knowing something. Something like this, I think is an iterative process. It's an iterative process with this committee, with the public, right? So something of this magnitude doesn't just happen in those four walls. It happens, comes here, and then, I would imagine there's solicitation of input from the community as well. And so there's an iterative process where specific feedback on those things, I think we're gonna have
Yeah.
plenty of
And I
opportunity.
tend to agree. I mean, I think the purpose of any motion we make tonight is to provide clarity and direction. And while those are a piece of what we've talked about, I think, I expect that every person in this room, anybody who's paid attention to it, Mr. Adams, Mr. Vieira, Mr. Kyra, everyone is being informed by the dialogue that we're having and the community's having. And certainly, the mentoring aspect has been something that's been highlighted by an awful lot of people. So I kind of share, everybody else's view, which is I don't think we need to get into that, into the motion, and it seems to suggest to me that you're highlighting two things, but, there are probably 14 others that would be excluded, and I don't necessarily know which is the most important, but I trust that, through all our dialogue, Mr. Adams, Mr. Vieira, Mr. Kyra understand what we're looking for, what the community's looking for in terms of aspects of the future program. So I'm comfortable moving forward without getting into those specifics.
But to your first part, Aaron, about timing, is
Yeah.
there any kind of feedback you guys can give us on how much time you think you need to reach out to whomever you want to include in this discussion and start coming up with something? Or at least do you see like an end date where it has to be done by X so that you can do Y? You know what I'm asking? Do you mind, Mike? Sorry.
Well, in ways come up there, I mean, the thing I think that the last part of that motion says is that we are not making any change, right? So unless they come back with something that says, hey, our transition plan is A, and we are not going to allow entry into the neighborhood program next year, well, the status quo is we are going to allow that in there, because I don't know what the right transition plan is. Is it a scaling down, or is it, hey, we're going to continue everything, and then I don't know that without a transition. You don't want to make a change like that without knowing how it's going to impact
I think
your plan.
there's value, and I'm interested to hear what Mike says in a second, but I think it's unrealistic for us to think that there are going to be very many people opting for a neighborhood program that has transition challenges to come with it at some point in time, whether it's now or 20 years from now. And so it may be unrealistic for us to say, well, just leave the status quo for forever, because at some point in time, that status quo, to your point, is going to be, hey, there's a lottery. You know, which program do you want to choose? And I think the natural consequence of things, if I'm a second grade parent, is I think I know what my decision would be while this is being discussed. So I think we probably, at a bare minimum, we need to have a pretty good idea before that lottery decision or those
Well, I mean,
communications go out.
or they need to say, hey, here's how we're gonna, you know, they need to come up with a plan that says, no, we want students in both programs. This is valuable to maintaining both programs, maintaining a I don't know, but if that's a desirable thing, then we need to take action to do that, whatever that action is, right?
Mike?
I think what we're talking about here is pretty monumental. When you talk about the vision that we're looking for in a school, there's wholesale changes that are going to be potentially coming here for everybody involved. And I think that one of the things that folks are focusing on is that it would be a phase out or whatever, but we're talking about an entire school who's going to be impacted by this. And to not give it the right amount of time would be problematic. When I think about our schedule, we only have 2 meetings with staff that are quote unquote mandatory a month.
Right.
So I would think that these meetings moving forward would be almost solely dedicated to this purpose, because everybody's voice needs to be heard. Everybody needs to have the time. I think on top of that, we have a number of other initiatives going on right now in our building that need folks' time and attention.
Of course.
But with all that being said, you have to take into consideration some of the things that have been discussed up here, right? We can't have a lame duck, so to speak, where we're saying what's going to happen next. And I think that I said it publicly 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. One of the reasons I think folks have, I think the numbers have dwindled, is that there has been this underlying thought that things might be going away. I would not anticipate, if we're talking about a wholesale change, that you'd have a bunch of people that were, banging down the door to get into a different program. So it's important that we come up with a solution soon. I know I'm kind of
Yeah, I hear what you're
walking
saying.
the
Like, you
fence
don't want to
here,
be
but
rushed.
I
And
don't.
it's not something to rush. It's a huge deal.
It's not fair to our staff to
Of
rush
course,
this.
yes.
I mean, I made it pretty clear. I think that I think a change is necessary,
Yeah.
but I also hope I made it clear that I want our staff to be a part of this change. This can't just be Mike Kyra's vision. This needs to be a Mindess staff vision, and we do have a number of very talented educators who have been working in a program for 20 years, and we need to get their input.
Absolutely.
Because their lives are going to be changing significantly if we make this shift. As are some of our folks who have been teaching one way in the single graded option, who have to understand that they're going to be making a shift as well if we're moving towards this flexible, grouping-based, skills-based model. So I think maybe what I would love to request is that you allow us the time to maybe report back in like January and say, where are we? Do we need more time? I don't know if that's appropriate, if that's too much, if that's too little, but at least it allows us the time to have some conversations about staff. We have a staff meeting tomorrow, faculty meeting tomorrow. My agenda went out on Sunday. I think my agenda just changed, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but the conversation needs to start now if the vote tonight says that we're making this change.
Right.
And perhaps giving us until January to come and say, hey, here's where we are right now. Do we need another month? Are we ready to present something? But with that, you know, January date in mind, it could at least give us sort of a,
Oh, absolutely. I don't think anybody here wants to see anything until it's ready, and until
Yeah.
you're ready, until everybody's felt like they've had their input. It was really just trying to get,
Yeah.
see
That
if,
sounds
get as much
reasonable to me.
clarification.
And if this is on our
Yeah.
action items, and, you know, Jim is certainly gonna keep us informed of
Right.
progress and say, hey, I think, you know, Mike and the staff should come before us and give us an update, then, I think it's gonna happen, right? And we just need, I think we should put on,
But I think the way
we've
that
had other
you've,
things in the action
the
items.
way that
so-
you've set the motion, though, it gives them the permission to start having those conversations that turn into real action plan, not just like what if, or, but it's time to really start planning.
What,
And-
what,
Sorry, go ahead.
what implicate, like, just what sort of framework are we working though within with the building? And what the requirements are from the state?
What do you mean?
Erin,
So-
can you say that again? I didn't-
Just as far as like with the building project and
Oh,
what
okay.
requirements they're looking from us and.
No, so, I mean, and, you know, Mike and Jim have been working really hard on the educational plan, and I think this motion gives them the ability to, you know, really work that plan into what's going on. And so that plan, just to give you a kind of framework, we're gonna be submitting a version of that to the MSBA, I believe, December 11th. It'll be before this committee, before that. So, but then they'll provide feedback, and so it's a, for at least this feasibility study, it's a living document.
It's iterative.
So, yeah, as things come out of there, and, you know, they've been thinking about what our needs are, and, you know, at the end of the day, I wanna be very clear, whatever comes out of this has to work in the current building too, right? So this isn't tied to, it's running in parallel and can be informed by all the great work that's being done as part of that project and can shape that project, but they're two separate things, and we can't say, hey, here's a program, we finalized the program and it's awesome, and we can't do anything meaningful until we have a building. That wouldn't be doing, you know, anybody any good. So it needs to be, and it can be iterative, right? The program say, hey, you know, our end goal is to do X, Y, and Z, but our sprawling building makes that difficult, but we can do this version of that model and then adapt it to a new space or something like that. But what they need to come up with has to be feasible in the space we have.
So can I just ask one other question, just because it does seem like a real date? When is the date when historically we've sent out communications to parents about choosing which program they want to
Yeah,
participate in?
so mid to late February is when we usually hold our options night, which is when we discuss the two options that are available for folks. I didn't choose that date. I think that was just kind of historically what's happened. I think that date can be sort of arbitrary. I mean, it helps us ultimately in the placement process, but typically we're placing our third grade students last anyway. So, yeah, it's. I think right now it's scheduled. I want to say it's like February 27th. I'm not sure off the top of my head if that's the exact date or not, but it's scheduled in
Yeah.
February.
I mean, just, so, I mean, what I'm sort of mentally going through is the last part of your motion, Paul, that sort of says everything stays status quo. If Mike's gonna need to know whether he's having an options night, you know, by the time within enough time to do something with it. And, so that, maybe that timeframe is a little softer.
Well, I mean,
But-
I mean, that detail is the detail they need to come back with. to us.
And that was where I was gonna go with it, is we're gonna have an opportunity to revisit whatever we put in place now. I mean, we will, at an earliest, it's probably January. But I think, even though that, I'm sort of in the big picture a little concerned about that language, I think practically speaking, we're gonna be revisiting this issue with something that's more specific between now and end of February.
Options night
so-
scheduled for Tuesday, February 25th, right now.
Okay.
And our first meeting in January is January 8th, that's the second. So,
That's, again, I think we need to get it right. And if it takes a little longer, it takes longer.
Right.
I think, we don't wanna come back with.
And we need to be thoughtful
That's right.
of maintaining the integrity of what we're doing
Yeah, we took
now
18
and-
months, if you go back in time when we talked about start time change, right? You made the vote then to say, okay, we're supporting this transition to a new start time. Come back 6-8 months, and then we had an implementation 18 months later, right? So we gave folks, almost a year and a half.
Right.
It was a year and a half, and faculty and staff a year and a half to start thinking and planning for an adjustment moving forward. I mean, that's how we approached it then, which I thought was a really, a smart way to do it, and just kept updating, the time schedule a number of times. You gave a parameter,
Right.
if you remember.
Right.
It needs to be no earlier than X and no later than, 8:30 for high school and middle school. And then it allowed us to go through iterations because we had to look at busing and athletics, and there were other, you just couldn't come with a full package at that point in time. And I think that's similar.
I think
to
we're all
this.
coming from the same place here, like, we want
It needs to work.
the fidelity of the program, has to be something that we can all vote comfortably on, and that involves you taking whatever time you need to figure that out, and I think we're all good with that, at the same time balancing the community's need and the staff and everybody else's need to kind of know what's what. So, within that framework. So if you're January and you're not really ready yet, as long as we get some kind of update on where it's at, then we kind of adjust from there.
So can I ask just one last question that I
Of
think
course, you
I'm ready
can
to
ask.
Jim, you've heard Paul's proposed motion. Are you comfortable with that gives you the level of direction you need to continue on with the work? And sort of including that question to you, Mike, as well. Do you feel that we're giving you the kind of direction you need to be able to take the next steps and working towards giving us a concrete proposal?
Yeah, I think it was pretty clear.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions about the motion or comments?
The only thing I would go back to is that sort of a second defense for the two added pieces that I wanted to amend the motion with, is this. When the initial communications went out and what we've experienced over the last 6 weeks is a lot of parents and that what appeared to be a binary choice. And I think where we're landing right now of giving the administration a set of directions of like, this is the direction we want to go, was not really what the parents and the community thought was happening. I think they really thought it was a binary choice, or that we're doing this or this, and that there wasn't going to be this much thought and consideration put into it. I think some people may have perceived it as taking an axe, and this is more like surgery. And my thought is, we have identified the most important pieces. We up here, the five of us, with our vision statement, we set the values of this community, and we've all come to an agreement of the values that we want to see in this program. So I don't understand why, in sort of showing to the community that we've heard them, we've listened to them, we are hearing the neighborhood teachers who have been a part of this program for 20 years and are very passionate about it, that we are listening, taking the best out of it and looking forward, and not necessarily having that binary option. I don't find any harm when we've all just agreed that that's what they're going to do anyway. For any parent going back and reviewing minutes, for anyone going back and reviewing this meeting, that this is, we have put it on paper and in stone, this is the value statement of what we are looking for at the new Mindess.
So if I may, I think you miscategorized. I have not thought about all the different things that I value in each program and come to any conclusions. I certainly agree that the two you threw out there are valuable and something I would like to see, but I don't know that there's not a more important one that I would throw out there, because I haven't looked at it in that lens. And I'll go back to the thing that says incorporates the best practices currently utilized both throughout Mindess and in education as a whole. So those best practices, I think, cover that. We've documented, we published everyone's thoughts. And so, you know, we're really looking, I think, for a directional, direction here, and not a micromanaging or dictation, because, and there's several of them sitting here that they're going to be champions to the things you just mentioned, right? That they're going to be voices, and we're going to be voices, and because I don't want the next email to say, well, you included these two, but what about this one? I don't see value in that dialogue. I see value in just saying, these professional educators, please go do what you do, and we have some of the best educators, I believe, in the area, right? So I think they're going to come back with something that we're all going to love, and we're going to have input in, and the community's going to have input in. And so the things that are valued, and if they're looking at minutes or looking at this video, I don't see how they miss the fact that we've heard what they said and do it. So I agree with the things you're saying. I do not agree that they should be in this motion. That I intentionally did not try to overstep and say, make sure you do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are typically things that wouldn't appear in a motion, honestly. You know what I mean? The details of how, like, we're giving the sort of the umbrella guidance and those. But having said that, I mean, I can't disagree with anything that you've said. I mean, we've been taking input. We agree with most of that input. And Jim can tell you, before we even started talking, I was texting him, I want to see mentoring. I want to see skills-based, we're telling the community, I hope, that we want the same things for those kids as you all do. I mean, I think we're just talking about the framework that it's offered in. But, so I don't really doubt that those things aren't going to end up there in some form. If we don't love what we see when it comes back to us, I think we'll have an opportunity to challenge it to a certain extent, again, because we don't do curriculum and we don't really get into the weeds that way, but we also do, like you said, we set the values. And I think all the things that we've been talking about, even based on the questions that we asked both of you this summer, I mean, I hope you get a feel for what we think is important, but I think it's the same thing that you think is important. I mean, I think a lot of us are much more on the same page about most of this than it might seem. I mean, because even though we might be removing some typical ways that we've been doing things, but at its core, I think we've been stating those values all along. And I don't think it belongs in the motion, but I'm with you on making sure that the community knows, like, we're for those things too. I'm for those things too. I can't speak for all of you, but I've heard you all say at one point or another that letters that came in, the ones that we didn't, that didn't maybe have some parts that we found difficult, most of the time, I could have written the letter myself. I mean, who wouldn't want to have Mrs. Fiandaca for like 50 years in a row? Seriously, and all of the other things that are great about the neighborhood, I would absolutely agree with every single wonderful thing that's been said about everything that was said. So that's not what's at issue, and I trust that you've heard. And that you'll make it happen. But what we don't know is when you sit down, like you said, you looked at the calendar. When you sit down and you look at how do I make this work in a building, in a system, that's their department. You know what I mean? They might come back and say, like, whatever, X was I know it's your highest priority, but I did everything I could to try to work it into a program, and it's not possible for whatever reason. You know what I'm saying, Erin? So I think we'll have a chance to weigh in, but telling them how to do it now, I think, is not what I would want to do. But anybody else can weigh in.
Yeah, I concur with Lori and Paul on this one.
I think we need to keep it broad and let them, exactly what you said. And they're going to involve the staff in the community. So I'm encouraged about that. I want to see what they come up with and come back with. So I don't want to put in too specific things that need to be in it. I just think let's keep it broad and exactly what you said. They know how we feel, they know how the community feels. There's been so many emails and all the discussion that, you're right. And if it doesn't show what we value, then obviously we would have input and we would say something, so.
Right.
Would you be willing to put out a statement after tonight's vote that speaks to those values? Because I do think that within the community, we've had some very intense emails sometimes that you can tell we've really ruffled some feathers with parents that are very dedicated. There's divisions within the building and some teachers that are upset and feel like their value system that they've built and loved is not being valued. Maybe a statement of support and a little more detail than what is in this broad motion as to what.
I think Lori had said a lot of it tonight.
Yes,
but you mean
but I
like a
think-
statement? I mean,
Well, I think that kind of has some of the same problems, right?
Okay.
Put something and making a statement about what we're going to do, and we don't know what we're going to do until we've been presented with something and we can decide whether it meets what we're looking for.
And
You know
as
what I'm
individuals, we could, you can certainly put that out there, but for us to put it as a committee, it would need to come, the statement would need to come here, and we would need consent. Doing things as a committee is inefficient a lot of times, right? We all know that's kind of a pain in the butt with open meeting law and everything. So I don't know how we as a committee can make a statement unless we sat here and crafted it right now.
Well, or continue saying like I just did, and I'll say it again. I want to see mentoring. I want to see the skills-based grouping. I think there should be the differentiation. Every kid should get what they need. I want to see students being able to develop meaningful relationships with adults in the building. And, I don't know if that takes 2 months or 3 years or whatever that looks like, but that's a value that's important to me. And I think you all should, and those aren't necessarily the only things. I'm just sharing, what's coming to mind right now and whatever we might have discussed over our prior meetings. But those things continue to be really important to me, and I think the best way to get it out there is just to be public about it. And I've already said it, but I'm happy to say it again publicly. But putting out a statement, I think, just complicates things because it still doesn't. Then they even have more of a roadmap. We're trying to say, present us with a unified program, okay? And you're the educators, and what that looks like to you. They've been in the building. They know who they're working with, and if we don't like it, you will have the opportunity to say so. So, but here's a chance for everybody to weigh in right now, so folks watching know what's important to you.
I guess on that broader point, I agree with the concerns about the challenge of putting together a statement, but I'm just thinking about all the emails, and I think one of the things that, so I'm not gonna say this is all the emails by a stretch, but a lot of them, we're all seeking something that I think is exactly what we're going to end up getting recommended. That include mentoring, that include the differentiated instruction, that include skills-based grouping. And it's because people haven't had the opportunity to see that and understand what it looks like yet, that what they're really, a lot of the emails are clamoring for is, I think, what we're gonna be delivering. And so from that perspective, I guess I want that to be out in the community as well. Because I'm saying that just drawing largely from mostly Mr. Kyra's presentations, both to us during the summer, but also 2 weeks ago, which really was a summary of what you provided to us over the summer. So I'm not, I think we've got to give it the space that it needs. I think we've got to give the administration the opportunity to work with all the people that are gonna have a hand in this and make a recommendation to us. And I think putting a statement out that is supportive of particular things, to Lori's point, has a lot of the same problems because you can't list them all. And if Lori tried to list them all, they may not be things that are consistent with the views of every member of this group or even a majority. They may not be things that are quite frankly in the best interest of the kids. You know, Jim and Mike might tell us, where'd you come up with that idea? That's the worst thing ever, you know? And so I think people who are interested in this subject are paying attention. They're at home watching. Some of them are here. We had, for anybody who's watching, our Nielsen ratings last time were like 450 people, which is probably total what we've had
World
over the last 5 years in all meetings. So I think that
part of it is that I looked, and there were 5 people watching earlier, and now it's up to 9.
okay.
So it's, our Nielsen ratings are a little.
Maybe they
Send it
trust
out by
the
email
teacher.
again. But I think it's, quite frankly, I think at this point it's time to call the vote and,
Yeah, I
you
do,
know,
I agree.
I mean, if you want to make a formal motion to amend the motion and see if you get a second, we can do that, but I think you know where you're going on that.
Yeah.
So I think it's
Should we
time
have
to,
him read it again, or?
I mean, I can certainly read it again if.
Why don't you, Paul,
but-
just
but
'cause
we've had it, so we won't need to second it, but,
All right, right.
you know, that I move to, that we unify the Mindess curricular programming, moving to an as yet to be determined model that incorporates the best practices currently utilized both throughout Mindess as well as in education as a whole. The details of this unified model, including structure, delivery methods, transition plan, and timeline for transition, will be voted on by the school committee when available. Until such time, no changes related to transition will be made.
And it was already seconded.
Yeah, it was seconded,
So
yeah,
all
so-
in favor?
Aye. any opposed?
Aye, aye.
It's
The ayes have it?
Bed's in here.
Thank you. Okay,
Mr. Rand?
thank you for your patience,
Thank you.
Barbara. Student Activity Bank reconciliations, quarter 1.
The real exciting stuff.
Yeah, you ready for some numbers?
Yes.
Yeah, we're ready for some numbers.
Speak 'em away.
So, a meeting or so ago, we had the last quarter student activity reconciliations before you. So this time, this is the first quarter of FY '20, July to September. So the reconciliations are done by the school secretaries. They're audited by Joan Plowski. The principal signs off, I sign off, and we need you to take a vote to allow the chair to sign off.
Have a motion?
So moved.
There wasn't a motion read, though. I typically
Kathy's
look
got it.
over
What's that?
at Kathy to read the motion.
You want me to, a motion to approve the FY '20 student activities account bank reconciliations for the period July 1st, 2019 to September 30th, 2019, as presented.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
FY19 budget end of year.
Yeah, so we thought we'd give you an update on how we closed FY '19, which closed June 30th, and the end-of-year report has been completed. It was completed timely. It was due October 1st. It was submitted the last week in September to DESI, so they have all of our information now. So in the general fund, I gave you the report, and we ended up closing the year with just over $5,000 that we returned to the town. I don't know if you recall, last year, we actually put a spending hold on in the middle of the year because our balances were so low.
Yeah.
By the end of the year, we were able to release some of that and allow the principals to buy the supplies they needed. So we were able to return just the $5,000 in FY '19. That's the general fund. And then I also gave you a report on the grants. We have 5 federal grants. We didn't have any state grants. And we have 2 local grants that we're trying to spend down. We've seen our grants diminishing every year, but these are the ones we have, and there are 2 with a negative balance on June 30th, but that's only because some of that funding comes in July and August, and it catches up. So by the time August 30th comes around, all of the grants are in reconciliation. Any questions on any of the grants?
Questions?
Okay. And then the next sheet is the revolving accounts and where we closed the year with the revolving accounts. So in total, there was about 4.3 million in revolving balances on June 30th. But I gave you a report that shows just about 2 million that's already being reserved to help offset the cost of this year's budget. So what we do is revenues that come in FY19 are still there at the end of the year because we're planning on using them in FY20. We always try to use revenues the next year so we know exactly the dollar amount we have. We don't want to build a budget on an estimate and then not have those revenues come in. So for instance, school choice, we're using $275,000 as a direct offset against the general fund, but you also allocated $153,000 to the building principals. Circuit breaker is $961,000. That's actually a Mass General law that we have to expend it within 1 year after we get it. Building rental, we're gonna offset the budget with $165,000. International tuition, $65,000, and school bus revolving, $300,000. So this is pretty typical of where we are at the end of the year. Any questions on the revolving?
Can you just briefly, Barbara, talk about the international tuition and sort of how that works?
Yeah, so actually at your last meeting, you voted to
Yeah.
approve the international tuition
Right.
and the 7 seats. So we have 7 international students at the high school this year,
Right.
and it brought in $109,000.
Wow.
So
Oh,
we're just
alright.
starting to put in a place on how to spend that money.
So the $65,000 is drawn down from last year's money that came into the revolving account. It's not. But what I want to make sure of is that it wasn't supporting, that we weren't a net negative on the program.
We are
Yeah,
not in a negative on the program. We're planning on using some of that tuition to fund one of the ELL teachers.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you ready to move on to FY20?
Let's do it.
Sure.
All right.
What about FY21?
Oh, I'm already there too,
I know,
working on that budget.
she does.
So FY20, I gave you the general fund expenditure report. This is as of November 4th. It shows an available balance of payroll of $766,000. We're still encumbering salaries. We still need to do substitutes. We don't know coaches until they actually get hired, so we can't encumber all the salaries. This is a good place for us to be. There is some savings in there from new hires we did this year, and I'm working with Superintendent Adams to come back to you with that plan on how we can use that money. The expenditures, if we kind of net them out, where's that number? It's about $171,000 available balance. In total, this is a really good place for us to be this time of year. Last year, we were under $500,000, and that's why we put the spending hold on.
I remember.
Yeah, so this is really where we want to be at this time of year. So I don't anticipate any spending holds this year. And I will just point out utility expenses. I've just done some analysis of that. Between the net metering agreements, we have 3 of them, and the solar panels, we have cut our cost, and Jim has the number, I don't remember it, significantly. And the net metering companies that we work with had built up credits before we signed with them, and then we bought them. So we're actually carrying a $100,000 credit on our electric bills right now. It's very strict on, it's difficult to move it around. You can do it once a year, so we're trying to figure out which account to move it to for this year to get the biggest bang for our buck. But utilities, electric, is in really good shape this year.
Awesome.
Do you remember how
Yeah.
much we've saved?
Yeah, $146,000.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great.
So we could afford to heat the buildings today when it was 19 degrees.
Well, the
out in
heat is
November.
different, so that's on the oil side, so let's be clear,
Okay.
those rates have actually gone up,
Yeah.
so.
Well, that might answer the question then, right? Where's the money go?
Can we put panels on the new modulars at Warren now that we have more roof space?
Probably not. I don't think they can carry the load. That's my guess. But until we own the modulars, that's, We still have another lease payment
We
to
don't,
go.
we don't have solar in Warren, do we?
No,
No, just
No.
middle and high school, right?
correct.
No, but one of the net metering agreements reduces the electric cost at Warren.
Right. we
So
can
we're
use it
using
to
one of those.
Offset the cost.
That's
That's awesome.
Any other questions on FY '20? I did point out a couple of lines, but there's nothing out of the ordinary here.
I'm sorry, I had to step out for a second, but, you know, the out-of-district special education, we just have to understand, I don't know if you mentioned it when I was up, it's still fluctuating. I mean, I got a call from Kathy today, right? So we have a student last week at Warren. So it's continually in flux. So it may look good right now, but, you know, after the call I got today, it may not look so, so good tomorrow. But,
Right, we anticipate changes.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but not to a point where we're looking at the sped stabilization fund either, right? That money that's sitting
Yeah.
on the town side.
Yeah.
No, but I'm saying
Now
at
you're
this
done.
point, we're not, we're in a position where we feel pretty good compared to last year at this time.
Right.
So
We had
And
this-
we're
We had a
also-
student move in last year,
Yeah,
$300,000
from out
student.
of state, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're also anticipating at the November town meeting a vote to put $137,000 into the school general fund.
Oh, okay.
And that's the
Week
70-30
from
split
today.
with the town.
Is it the free cash?
No,
No,
it's
it-
the net difference between the original budget and the governor's
Oh,
budget.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Great.
it. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Barbara.
thank you,
Thanks,
Barbara.
Barbara.
Thanks for
Thank you,
waiting it
Barbara.
out.
Yes, thank you, appreciate
I was gonna
that.
stay for that
I know you
anyway,
were.
so.
In and out in 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you, Barbara.
Do we have a superintendent's report?
Sure, I'll make it brief. I always say that, right?
Famous last words.
No,
Until somebody on this side of the table asks a question.
right, no, again, I want to just start by saying thank you to the community
Maybe I'll spend it.
and the thoughtfulness of the school committee. I think what isn't seen by the community is that, you know, I thought a lot about, all 5 of you have had students who have participated in, you know, the multi-age program, and so you're very thoughtful about the entire situation, and I appreciate that, for one, that there's no just, you know, fait accompli, everything's just done because we asked for it. It's very thoughtful dialogue, and I appreciate that so much. I think we have some direction, and we'll work towards that. But I just want to give a brief update on some things with regard to the building project and some dates. I think that's critically important that you all hear it, but also the community hears it as well. So next week, I've asked to have, and I'll post it tomorrow, a meeting before town meeting, if you will, to have you review the first, it's really the second draft of the education program that Mike and I have been writing. And really the focus is on the space that we currently have, the number of students we have, what some wish lists are from, we've actually asked the faculty at Mindess, what are things that they would want in a new building, in a facility, and that's been incorporated into the program. What does it look like with 635 students? What does it look like with 845 students? One thing we haven't mentioned here is that we have a couple options that we're looking at from a building standpoint. How does the 2.5 building look different than a 3.5 building in dealing with programming as well? So there's some other complexities that will eventually come through with the building project and getting squared away there.
Jim, just on that point, when do we get an answer as to sort of what the recommendation is?
Right. So-
And I suppose, is that, should I
That's
shut
where
up?
I'm
and
headed.
let you- Go ahead. Sorry about that.
I'll give you those dates right now. So next week, you'll just see a draft of the information that Mike and I have written. We've given to the educational consultant who's part of the design team. They have the most experience working with the MSBA in what the MSBA is looking for. We've just received their feedback on Monday, so Mike and I are redrafting it based on the feedback from David Stephen, who's from New Vista Design. And so you'll get a chance to look at that next week as a draft and provide feedback. We then will take that, rework it again, and go to the school building committee, who has to review it and give feedback on December 3rd. And the timing is really tight only because we have Thanksgiving in there and we don't have an opportunity to have that second meeting. So what happens is in December, on December 3rd, the school building committee does the authorization to shortlist options and to submit information to the MSBA for their first review. This is not no one's committed to anything. It's an opportunity for the MSBA to provide us feedback. And Paul can get in, he's really understands all the options that were presented last night, and we've seen it. We were there.
He's already used up his words.
Well, we were there from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock yesterday, just with the school building, and that's every other week for us, it seems, that 6-hour window. December 11th, our draft goes to the MSBA. So once it's approved by the school building committee, the group that's been authorized by the town to act on behalf of the town, then in January, this is where we're getting to your question. We're looking for a tri-board meeting, January 29th, where we will have a review of schematic design proposals from the short list after the feedback, etc. February 4th or 5th, right around there, we'll be asking at that point for the school committee to take a formal vote on the education plan that's being presented to, again, this is not binding us to, I think Paul said it earlier, it's not saying this is the type of model we have to have at the Mindess at this point in time. We will write in there, and now that I have direction, what Mike and I will do is incorporate the conversation and the vote that the school committee had this evening, that we've been charged with reviewing the programming and providing more detail in the future. They may come back and say, okay, what does that look like? I don't know. But typically it's the template is looking at space and how much space we need, how many classrooms we need based on the number of students we have. Are there additional space that we might be looking at that eventually we could then incorporate into whatever model, education delivery model we decide on? How will that fit into the building itself?
Sorry, can you just give me that date again, Jim, the February date?
4th or 5th.
Okay.
I think,
for some reason, I don't have any of our school committee meetings in my calendar in February.
well, that would
We'll see
normally
you
be,
in March.
that would not be,
I think the 5th is the Board of Selectmen, right?
but well, correct. It would be a dual meeting where both of you sign off on
So
the
4th
vote.
or
I mean,
5th.
it has to be voted by both. Then on February 13th, we deliver it to the MSBA, or it's delivered by the OPM and the designer. So we've got a 2-month timeline, really, and there'll be a number of iterations of the education program. Your opportunity is to just give some feedback, hey, and then the school building committee to give feedback. And then for Mike and I to rework it, have it looked at again. Part of it is I want to have it put back in the hands of David Stephen, who's been doing all the hard work and of running the workshops for us, to get his feedback. Again, he's done this numerous times with the MSBA, and I want to make sure that it incorporates all of your thoughts, our thoughts, etc. Then I think that covers where we are, with the exception of on the 25th of November at 6 o'clock,
6 to 8
6 to 8 p.m.
in the Mindess
For the
cafeteria.
community. Miles, can you get this? Right? 6 to 8, here it is, thanks.
Yes.
So as you can see, from 6 to 8 p.m. on the 25th, there'll be another update to the community on where we stand today, the work that we've done as a building committee. And it can't go without saying the amount of time and effort that people are putting into this particular project is enormous. Like I said yesterday, I mean, Paul was there, Mike was there. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon till 9 o'clock last night. And that's a regular occurrence with the working groups that we're going through. So thank you for all that work and time and effort. It would be great to have the community come out and hear what's going on. We had a workshop that we advertised numerous times and had, posters up, and again, we're getting 20 people, 25 people to show up to talk about future programming, but no one, you know, it's a very concentrated, it's a pretty good mix though of folks, you know, across the demographic of the town, whether it's the Ashland Public Library, whether it's, you know, ASHPAC or some teachers.
Jim, is this similar to the last event that was at the high school?
No.
No, it's
Similar to the first event we had at the Mindess.
Okay,
So
so more update than
Yeah,
workshop.
it's kind of a hybrid, right?
Right.
So
Okay.
during this
You
one,
get
it's
some
gonna
feedback.
focus on design options, the educational program, the sustainability and security, providing some input to the community, but really wanting the questions as well. So the format will be more like the first one, where there's gonna be a presentation and things like that, not the small groups, but really looking for input. That'll be a great opportunity for the people in the town to say, hey, before it gets really shortlisted, well, here are the different things that we're looking at. You know, I really like a building in this, on this site, in this orientation. I like the 8:45 versus the 6:35, or vice versa, or whatever that is, and providing that feedback. You know, so and it's a great opportunity for the community members to ask that of the project team.
Yep.
Right, so the OPM, the designer, the educational program, that team will be there and be able to answer questions, you know, more succinctly than either Jim or I will be able to.
So, and last thing, Triple E, I think, is done with.
Yeah.
Pretty cold last night.
Well, I know, but listen, I was on the phone most of the day on Saturday, well, in the morning, trying to make sure that the Board of Health, as well as the Department of Health, would free us up so we could actually have a Friday night football game this year, which we will have. Friday night, the finals, 7 p.m. against Old Rochester, opportunity to go to the Super Bowl at Gillette in a couple weeks. So exciting time. It's but congratulations also to our volleyball team, who had a tremendous season. I'm still trying to figure out, I'm on the board of directors of the MIAC, which is it's the governing board of the MIAA, why Westboro and Ashland had to drive to Canton to play, but I still can't figure some of the things out with that organization. Beyond me. It's crazy. You know what, we go to Algonquin, Northborough, we're right there. But now we had to go to Canton. But the ladies had a great season.
Think of it as getting sent to the Western bracket in the NCAA.
Yeah, well, understood. I had that happen once, you know. So, but that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Vera, do you have an assistant superintendent's report
You
this
have a
evening?
copy of my report for my newsletter for the month of October. If you have any questions, more than happy to answer
Is
them.
this a new format?
It is a new format, thank you.
I did have a question.
She didn't actually say she liked it. She just
No, I'm just happy that she noticed it.
For noticing.
I'm thankful that she noticed
Thank you for
it.
noticing.
Because that's what
Looks good on you,
Kathy
though,
is
eh?
all about.
Now,
She
now's
knows.
the part where she says it stinks.
Right.
I know,
But
but
she's the graphic designer. You know that.
He's thanking her for noticing.
I'm thanking her for noticing.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
I get you, Paul.
thank you.
And you're
We're on the
welcome.
same wavelength.
I was wondering, so I was reading it, your professional development part here, you said the school counselors ensuring all students are future ready. So there's a free event coming up
Sure. there
Friday,
will-
do you have people going?
Um,
It's for school counselors, and I was just curious.
I did not see anyone sign up directly.
Oh, the Masco.
Yeah.
So last year Jen had, I think, 3 counselors went.
Oh, okay. It's free, and
Typically,
it sounds good.
Corey McGann or Brian Garrigan before
Yeah.
that would go.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the PD come through
I
yet
haven't seen
either,
it come
but
over, yeah.
Just curious.
yeah.
So, you felt like going to a new format?
I felt like we're in a new format.
I like it.
Thank you.
The rest of us will read it next time.
Right, straight from our graphic designer. Anything
That
else?
was good to.
That's it, thank you.
That's it. Okay, thank
I
you.
don't- I don't think I have any
Do you have any warrant approvals?
I didn't get anything. Did you?
Let me see.
Okay, Erin. All right, I didn't get
No, I
anything.
didn't say anything.
Okay.
You don't know whether you signed anything?
I don't know what I signed.
You're away.
No, though, I did sign before I left, but I didn't get a
That's not on
blurb,
here.
so next time I'll update everybody.
Minutes, October 30th. Anybody have anything?
The one thing that was
Oh,
our last meeting that I wanted to sort of comment on, and it's not an issue with the minutes, but it was me thinking after the meeting. So I had recused myself from the discussion of the last potential MASC resolution, and then I made the motion as summarizing what we all said. And so it's not, doesn't create an ethical conflict. It was sort of a, because of my business and representation of charter schools, I chose to stay away from that issue, and yet I ended up making the motion, voting for a position on it. So I would just, I think my discussion was clear that I didn't intend to take a position on that, but obviously the motion would reflect differently. So if the minutes could reflect this time, that the motion that I made was really to reflect sort of a summary of what the school, the school committee had articulated for positions, but that I was not expressing an opinion as to the last of those resolutions.
And
I
that
appreciate
was
that
in
in this minutes.
Page 6.
It's not,
Last
it is
one?
not, yeah, it was October 30th,
Okay.
but it was
Yeah,
not.
so yeah, he's just asking that
Yeah.
These
this meeting
reflect,
minutes
yep.
clarify the position
These
you
minutes
took on
that
that.
we're in,
Yeah.
Yes,
the moment that we're in,
the moment
I
that we're
got
in,
it.
today, the 13th of November.
Not to change
At too
these,
close
but
to
to
8 o'clock.
reflect it today, got it.
The only thing I
She
asked
loves your newsletter.
Aaron to change, yeah.
Yes.
I love Nicole Abatini.
Yeah.
Right.
And I hope she's doing well in school, but
Hi,
Rachel was
Nicole.
here representing us.
Yes.
Oh,
Would
I
you like to
didn't
be
know
Nicole
that. Was that in
Abatini
there?
too? You can be in college already.
She's pretty
yeah.
amazing, but.
She is pretty, but so are you, Rachel, so.
Yes, you
Yes.
are, Rachel.
And if I could just
Oh,
add one
didn't
thing, I
even
know
catch that.
Mrs. Williams said that there were people watching on Facebook. Mrs. Cutler just sent me a text message that they are going.
Oh,
to
thank you.
So one of those
Hi,
watching,
Jen.
Maybe,
one of those
maybe
people
our
watching
director of
is
social
Jen-
emotional
is
learning.
Jen Cutler.
It's down to 6, so,
It's
yeah.
not just
Yeah.
6, so she's one of the 6
No,
right
it
now.
just,
Hi,
it
Miss
looked,
Gum.
it looked like
Yeah.
great, and so I was just curious
Yeah.
if someone was taking advantage of it.
Excellent, thank you. I know, this is great. Last time we had Kelly waving in at the right
That's
time,
right.
giving us some info.
So now we know that the only people who watch are other administrations in the
Jen,
district.
Kelly, yeah. It's all good, though.
It's
That's
good that
how
they're
we-
watching,
We
but-
get feedback pretty quickly. And October 23rd, 2019, any issues on those minutes? No? Do you have a motion?
So, I would move to approve the regular session minutes for October 23rd as presented. And then I'll make a separate one for this one as amended, because we need to
So-
change
So
it.
I'll
Go ahead.
second your motion for the October 23rd minutes.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then I move we approve the regular session minutes for October 30th as amended.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
So October 30th, oh my
You
God.
weren't here.
Right, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And
It was-
you can still vote on it, it has nothing to do with.
I don't like voting on minutes that I wasn't
Yeah,
here
I don't
for.
either,
Abstain.
Aaron, yeah.
Sorry,
You can
so
abstain, it's fine.
abstain.
So either way works.
401.
Or you can be Nicole. and-
Get 20 years back?
I was
Okay.
gonna say, yeah, go back in time.
I
Acceptance
don't want
of
to do those
gifts.
over.
Yeah, so we have a couple,
Well, you know now.
couple gifts.
Yeah.
Multiple donors. It was the book fair at the Mindess School, $8,280.82.
Wow.
That's great.
Nice.
Excellent.
In Ohio Pile Prints, $290.04 to miscellaneous gifts and donations for a grand total of $8,570.87.
Excellent. Do we have a motion for that?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. We made it all the way to member updates. Rachel?
Well, the first term is over.
Yeah.
So that was
You
exciting.
survived.
Yes. And that was basically how all the seniors felt. We were all like, okay, we can breathe now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other than that, we are looking forward to our Thanksgiving rally and especially the football game this Friday.
Oh, I
Very
know.
exciting.
Yeah, we
Are
hope
we gonna
everyone
even
comes
be
out.
able to get into that? Is it gonna be so sold out that it's
Well, they
like
said get
crazy?
there early.
Get
Yes.
there early?
Yeah, it starts at 7, but you probably want to go early.
Yeah, I'd like to see that game.
Tickets are $10, right?
You're not
Students
gonna-
are
you're not gonna climb a tree behind your house?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes we've watched like the Thanksgiving
That's
game
true.
from the fence
From the
up there.
fence,
Yeah.
sure.
Good view. And you can bring the dog.
From the grassy knoll.
Absolutely. Paul?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about this beforehand. We had the conference obviously last week, so that's always a great time. I'm sure you'll all maybe share what you got out of that. As Jim mentioned, we had a building committee meeting last night, and we are actually gonna have one, next Tuesday as well, just because there is a lot of information going around, and I wanna make sure that that group has the ability, because at our December 3rd, which is our next scheduled meeting for that group, they were supposed to both approve the submission of the ed plan and whatever the current list of options would be for the site options. So we're gonna actually have another meeting next week to just give them another opportunity to look at that information and have a dialogue about it before our December 3rd, because it's a lot to look at. That ed plan isn't just, a few pages. That's a lot of information there, and not that they need to weigh in terribly on it, but I want them to be able to,
How much time should we set aside for reading that?
to be honest,
52 pages.
to be honest, I have not read it yet, because they sent it, and then I know David was gonna do it, so I'm like, I'm not gonna
Half hour
invest that
mark is
time.
plenty. Half hour's fine.
I'll block Sunday.
Have a nice weekend.
Yeah.
So,
Don't have it Saturday.
yeah, I think those are the big things, and as Jim said, I would really love to have the community out for the 25th. We have the public forum. It's at Mindess Cafeteria, 6 to 8. It's just another opportunity to be able to ask questions about it. It's gonna be focused on the design options, sustainability, school security. They'll lay out some of the things we've been discussing in the building committee, and we've discussed here a little bit. And so it's really that interactive piece that the community can start to get their hands on it and probe and ask questions to the project team. So I'd encourage everybody to come out and see that.
Excellent, thanks, Paul. Erin?
It was nice to be together at the conference. And I'm doing my good deed by letting my babysitter go early on Friday night so she can go to the football game.
Oh.
Rachel? Need that money for college.
There's a very sad child who's gonna miss
Same.
Elton John though, but I mean, football team's worth it. I'm kidding, oh my God.
Kathy?
Yeah, just the conference was good that we've gone several years now, and it's great professional development. Appreciate the opportunity to go. It's great to bond and talk about big issues, and to have that available to us. So it was another good conference. I definitely always get something out of it, and things to keep thinking about, or new things to think about. So.
Yeah, sort of the conference last week was the big thing. Getting my wheels straight here. And I share a lot of your sentiments. I thought there was a lot of really good discussion about equity in education, which really, I think, helped me think about what we were talking about earlier today, and really emphasizing the importance of that. But like my colleagues, I wanted to recognize, and I was thinking about this even before today, but even tonight, I really am grateful for being able to serve on a committee with people who are so thoughtful and more concerned about what's right for kids and for the community than any personal agendas. And I just was really thinking about that as people were talking tonight as well, and just the thoughtfulness that everybody in this board has. Don't mean to exclude Mr. Adams or anybody else from that, but we're the ones that elected, we're the ones that the community chooses, and it just is, it's an honor to serve with you.
Thank you, Mark. I share your sentiment, and the conference is a good time too. We're there with school committees from all over the entire state and superintendents. There are a ton of people there, but rare for an entire committee to show up. Are we the only one? Do you think?
We're the only one that has the entire committee.
Year after year.
Props to Framingham, who I think.
They got 38 members now.
With
8 out of the 9.
8 out of 9 or something
Yeah.
like that.
It was pretty good.
And
they just were elected,
Right.
the day before.
Yeah, the day before.
Yeah.
They were still there.
Yeah.
So, give them props to next door neighbors.
But to my point, it really is nice to work with a group of people who are committed to learning more, who are committed to fostering healthy dynamics with each other so that we could get our work done. We have good relationships with our administrators, and that too is a blessing. And I really do appreciate all of you as well, and the opportunity, even after 9 years. Sometimes I think, all right, I've taken that class before, like, do I really need to go? And I get in the room and I realize, yes, I really did need to go, because I always learned something as well.
It's always changing.
It's always
Yeah.
changing, and, kudos to the people who run it, because it is a very well-organized and well-run event. It gives us lots of opportunities to learn about all kinds of things, law, school law, policy, communication, you name it.
Finance.
Yeah,
There were a lot of
finance.
design sessions
A lot of
this time.
design
and,
sessions.
she designed we could probably fire the designer.
Yeah,
She drew up a whole, yeah.
She did a
Yeah.
bubble.
and it's thematic, social emotional learning is a big deal right now for everybody, and they tend to gear courses towards what a lot of us are thinking about, equity and education and so forth. So, I would agree, that's all I've done since the last time, and that's it. Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
No, action items?
Oh, action items. I
We
never
always
want to
do
do those
that.
action
You
items.
never want to.
Oh my
Do
gosh.
that before the member updates.
I know, right,
Hey,
Kathy?
that's a
We should
good
do it
idea,
first.
you know?
I feel like
Yes.
it is an ending, like we're
Right.
ending our,
Yeah.
Exactly.
our
It
time
seems
that
like
we've
the
been away,
natural-
here's what we've done, and good night. No,
I agree.
We're just gonna
feels
keep-
that
So
way.
Yeah,
what's
same
the-
old stuff.
And we're keeping on, I think the Mindess academic discussion.
It's
I would
ongoing.
say winter.
Now we'll
Uh,
say winter.
Ongoing is fine.
Yeah,
Winter
well,
2020?
Maybe winter for an update.
Yeah.
We're not gonna
Winter
put
up-
any
we'll do a winter
deadlines
update.
on
Yeah.
you, but
That's right.
just if you keep us in the loop,
Yeah.
which I'm sure
We'll
you
just
will.
change the terminology.
And same other stuff that just ongoing conversations for the winter, fees, athletic fees, Columbus Day, Mindess academic study discussion for the winter, communication strategies, school committee goals. Mark it, you and I need to,
Yeah,
Get
we keep
together.
saying that, don't we?
yeah. But we will. Took
By the
Paul and
time
I
the
a
year is
while.
over,
But that's
we'll-
why it's on
that
here.
Lori,
So-
given that the Board of Selectmen didn't want to take up the Columbus Day issue, could we put it on the agenda in one of the next couple of meetings? And just so we can get it off of our action list, no matter which way it goes, but just
Sure.
like to get it off.
Yeah, we can talk in agenda planning and see when it makes the most sense to bring that up again.
'Cause when
Just,
do we
you
vote
know,
on our
just
calendar?
for just to
We've got
recap.
next year's already set.
Yeah, we already have next
We
year's
have
set.
2 years ahead set, right?
Yeah.
So then we can always modify it. We do with
Right.
the,
We've got one more, we've already set this calendar for 21, 22. No, 2021.
Right.
And then remember, in 21, 22, that's when we'll start actually celebrating Diwali as well, as part of the
Just because of the way.
recognition,
when-
because it's not
yeah.
on the weekend.
Right. Move to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We had 3 seconds.